Ever wondered what happens to corrupt guards who end up in prison? How do those who are supposed to maintain order find themselves on the wrong side of the law and become inmates? It's a tricky situation, and one big question arises. Should these guards be kept separate and safe from other inmates? We'll break down why this is so important and what might go wrong if they're not given special protection. In simple terms, we're going to look at why it's crucial to keep these guards safe in prison and what might happen if we don't. Safety first. When corrupt prison guards are incarcerated, they face unique challenges due to their prior occupation and the potential threats they might encounter from fellow inmates. In a correctional facility, their former colleagues or inmates with connections to the outside world may seek to exploit their presence for various reasons, including intimidation, revenge, or extortion. As a result, these individuals are considered at risk and require special measures to ensure their safety. One way to keep these prisoners safe in prison is to transfer them to a more secure federal prison. Federal prisons often have higher security levels and better resources to manage high-profile or at-risk inmates. By transferring corrupt guards to such facilities, authorities can mitigate the risk of attacks or retaliation from other inmates, especially if the guards had previously worked in state or local prisons where they might be more vulnerable. Federal prisons tend to have more experienced and well-trained staff, along with a greater emphasis on security protocols and intelligence gathering. This makes it more challenging for outside threats to target inmates inside the facility. However, transfers to federal prisons may also present challenges, such as uprooting the inmate from their support network, family, and friends. It can lead to additional stress and emotional strain for both the inmate and their loved ones. Another approach to ensure the safety of corrupt guards is through the use of protective custody. Protective custody involves separating certain inmates from the general population and placing them in a more controlled and secure environment. This is done to reduce the risk of harm from other inmates who may seek to harm or exploit them. In protective custody, prisoners are typically housed in a separate unit away from the general inmate population. They have limited interaction with other inmates and are closely monitored by prison staff to prevent any potential threats. However, protective custody can have its downsides. Being isolated from the general population may lead to feelings of loneliness, depression, and a lack of social interactions. Additionally, inmates in protective custody may be stigmatized by others in the prison environment, viewing them as informants or snitches, which can lead to additional tension. This principle extends beyond corrupt prison guards and encompasses the entire prison system. Instances like the 1994 incident where Jeffrey Dahmer, a well-known serial killer, was beaten to death by a fellow inmate, and the 2022 case where mob gangster James Whitey Bulger suffered the same fate at the hands of fellow inmates serve as examples of the risks and dangers faced by inmates within the prison environment. So even though prisoners who are placed under protective custody have been shielded from the general population, they can still be victims of violence. In the case of a corrupt prison officer, let's take Derek Chauvin, for example. 46-year-old Derek Chauvin was a former Minneapolis police officer who gained notoriety for his involvement in the killing of George Floyd on May 25, 2020, based on suspicion of using a counterfeit $20 bill at a market. The incident led to widespread outrage and protests across the United States and around the world. Throughout his career, Chauvin had 18 documented complaints filed against him and was a part of 3 police shootings, with one resulting in a fatality. Additionally, he received 2 letters of reprimand for instances of misconduct. The crime Derek Chauvin committed against Floyd was captured on video by bystanders and went viral on social media. The footage showed Chauvin kneeling on George Floyd's neck for over 9 minutes while Floyd repeatedly said he couldn't breathe and begged for his life. Despite Floyd's pleas and the concerns of onlookers, Chauvin maintained his position until Floyd became unresponsive. He was later pronounced dead at a nearby hospital. Chauvin's actions were deemed excessive and unjustified by numerous law enforcement experts and led to criminal charges against him. He was taken into custody on May 29, 2020. The subsequent events included his prosecution and trial, during which the world watched closely to see how justice would be served. On October 7, 2020, Chauvin was released on conditional bail after posting a bond of $1 million. Following that, on October 22, 2020, Hennepin County Judge Peter Cahill dismissed the third-degree murder charge, but upheld the other, more serious murder charges against Chauvin. Judge Cahill also decided that Chauvin and the 3 other officers charged would be tried together in Hennepin County on November 5, 2020. However, the situation changed on January 13, 2021, when Judge Cahill reversed his previous ruling, opting for Chauvin to be tried separately from the other 3 officers. Subsequently, on March 11, 2021, Cahill reinstated the third-degree murder charge against Chauvin. Chauvin faced charges of second-degree unintentional murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. During the trial, which began on March 8, 2021, compelling evidence, including the video footage and testimony from witnesses, was presented to demonstrate that Chauvin's actions were responsible for Floyd's death. The trial attracted significant media attention and heightened emotions due to the gravity of the crime and its impact on communities worldwide. On April 20, 2021, the jury delivered its verdict, finding Derek Chauvin guilty on all 3 charges. The verdict was celebrated by many as a step towards accountability for police officers involved in incidents of excessive force and brutality. However, the trial and verdict also highlighted potential risks that individuals like Chauvin may face in prison. Following his conviction, Chauvin was transferred to the Minnesota Department of Corrections. He was booked into the Oak Park Heights prison, where he had been previously incarcerated after his 2020 arrest. During his time at Oak Park Heights, Chauvin was held in solitary confinement for 23 hours a day in a secluded wing of the prison, under constant surveillance due to safety concerns. He remained at Oak Park Heights until his sentencing hearing on June 25, 2021. Prior to the sentencing, Judge Peter Cahill allowed the prosecution to pursue a harsher prison sentence, acknowledging Chauvin's treatment of Floyd as exhibiting particular cruelty. The prosecution sought a 30-year prison sentence for Chauvin, emphasizing the extreme cruelty displayed during Floyd's murder. However, Chauvin pleaded not to be incarcerated and instead requested probation for his actions as a former officer. On June 25, 2021, Chauvin received a sentence of 22.5 years in prison for the second-degree murder charge, while the other charges remained unadjudicated. Considering the 199 days of credit he received, the earliest he could be eligible for parole would be in 2035 or 2036, close to his 60s. The Federal Bureau of Prisons has scheduled his release for September 4, 2038, and ultimately on August 24, 2022, Chauvin was transferred from Oak Park Heights to FCI Tucson in Arizona, a federal facility operated by the Bureau of Prisons. Another case involves inmate Kalief Browder, an African-American young man from the Bronx, New York. Between 2010 and 2013, he was held at the Rikers Island jail complex without trial, accused of stealing a backpack that contained valuable items. Browder was incarcerated at the Robert N. Devoren Center, RNDC, on Rikers Island, which was known for a deep-seated culture of violence, as described by Preet Bharara, the United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York. Inmates at RNDC suffered from severe physical abuse, including broken bones, lacerations, and other injuries. During his time at RNDC, Browder experienced harsh conditions. Inmates had to wash their own clothes using soap in a metal bucket, resulting in rust stains on their clothes. To protect himself from potential harm, Browder slept on top of his belongings, including the bucket, and felt the pressure to build physical strength. Unfortunately, Browder became a victim of prison violence on multiple occasions. He and other inmates were subjected to physical abuse by correction officers to identify the instigator of a fight, and threats of solitary confinement were used to silence the inmates from reporting their injuries. In one incident, Browder was attacked by 15 gang members after retaliating against a gang leader who had spat in his face. This led to him spending a significant amount of time in solitary confinement, where he faced further mistreatment by correction officers, including physical assaults while he was showering. Throughout his time behind bars, Browder endured a staggering 700 days in solitary confinement. Despite the challenging circumstances, Browder tried to make the best of his time in solitary confinement by engaging in activities such as reading and studying for the General Educational Development (GED) examination. Sadly, after his release, he struggled with mental health issues and tragically died by suicide in 2015. So you see, inmates who have committed high-profile crimes, particularly those involving police officers, may be at heightened risk in the prison environment. They could face threats from other inmates who may seek revenge or retribution, particularly if their actions have fueled community outrage. Moreover, Chauvin's former occupation as a police officer might add another layer of complexity to his safety concerns, as fellow inmates may hold grudges or harbor animosity towards law enforcement personnel. In Browder's situation, despite the initial intention to place him in solitary solitary confinement due to the threats he encountered, he still experienced the emotional distress associated with the challenges he endured prior to the actual transfer. To mitigate these risks, authorities may need to consider placing individuals like Chauvin in protective custody or transferring them to a more secure facility. Such measures aim to ensure their safety while serving their sentences and to prevent potential incidents of violence against them by other inmates. Ultimately, the decision to place a corrupt guard in protective custody or transfer them to a federal prison is made based on the individual's specific circumstances and the level of threat they face. The goal is to strike a balance between ensuring their safety and providing them with an appropriate environment for rehabilitation and reintegration into society, as well as ensuring that they face appropriate consequences for their corrupt actions. However, being a prison guard doesn't necessarily mean that you would be imprisoned in the same prison you used to guard. Due to the potential threats from inmates who might hold grudges or seek revenge, the former guard is usually transferred to a different correctional facility. Some may be placed in solitary confinement, where they are kept isolated from the general inmate population, and in most cases, to enhance personal safety, some might even find it necessary to associate with other like-minded individuals, such as forming alliances with other prison staff or joining certain inmate groups or gangs. This takes us to the various types of gangs and inmate groups that can exist within the prison environment. The existence of these gangs can create difficulties and pose potential risks for individuals such as former prison guards who find themselves incarcerated. These usually come together as a way to safeguard their members, assert authority, and consolidate influence within the prison setting. The gangs could either be Hispanic, African American, or European-based. Prison gangs. In correctional facilities across the country, a myriad of prison gangs has emerged as potent and influential forces, each cultivating its own distinctive subculture within the complex and often perilous environment of incarceration. Among these formidable groups are the notorious Aryan Brotherhood, the powerful Mexican Mafia, and the formidable Black Guerrilla family, just to name a few. These prison gangs, with their deeply ingrained histories and hierarchies, have established their presence through alliances formed based on shared ideologies, ethnicity, or geographical origins. They wield significant power and influence, both within the prison walls and beyond, reaching into the outside world to further their criminal enterprises and territorial ambitions. The Aryan Brotherhood, also known as the Brand or the AB, is a neo-Nazi prison gang and an organized crime syndicate that operates within the United States. It boasts an estimated membership of 15,000 to 20,000 individuals, both incarcerated and free, regarded as the nation's oldest major white supremacist prison gang and a national crime syndicate by the Southern Poverty Law Center, SPLC, and labeled the oldest and most notorious racist prison gang in the United States by the Anti-Defamation League. The group has a long history of violence and criminal activities. Their actions include drug trafficking, extortion, inmate prostitution, and murder for hire. Until the 1960s, most prisons in the United States were racially segregated. However, as desegregation efforts began, many inmates formed racial-based gangs. The Aryan Brotherhood is believed to have originated at San Quentin State Prison, possibly inspired by the Bluebird Gang. The group's initial target was the Black Guerrilla family, a militant African-American group. During the early 1970s, the Aryan Brotherhood briefly associated with Charles Manson and the Manson family, but this alliance dissolved due to the group's disapproval of the murder of the pregnant actress Sharon Tate. The Aryan Brotherhood rapidly expanded within the California prison system, leading to a race war in 1975 with rival gangs like La Nuestra Familia and the Black Guerrilla family. As a result, California prison officials segregated these gangs into different facilities, but this isolation allowed the Aryan Brotherhood to flourish and solidify its leadership structure. In 1981, Thomas Silverstein and Clayton Fountain were charged with the murder of black inmate Robert Chappelle at the United States Penitentiary, Marion. They subsequently killed another inmate, Raymond Smith, before planning to attack a correctional officer. On October 22, 1983, Aryan Brotherhood members killed 2 correction officers at Marion, using tactics developed from a previous inmate murder. During the 1990s, the Aryan Brotherhood shifted its focus away from strictly racial motives and turned to organized crime activities such as drug trafficking, prostitution, and sanctioned murders. Their influence within the prison system even surpassed that of the American Mafia. In 1996, when Gambino crime family boss John Gotti was assaulted by an African-American inmate, he allegedly sought help from the Aryan Brotherhood to retaliate. However, the plan was abandoned after Gotti's attacker was placed in protective custody. custody. The one-time protective custody came in handy. Ultimately, in April 1993, the Aryan Brotherhood, along with members of the Black Muslims and other gangs, initiated the Lucasville prison riot in Ohio, taking officers hostage and killing 9 inmates and an officer. Their grievances included alleged abusive treatment, overcrowding, and religious objections to mandatory tuberculosis testing for Black Muslims. Similarly, the Mexican Mafia, an influential Hispanic gang, has orchestrated heinous crimes both within and outside prison confines, extending its reach through a vast network of loyal members. The Mexican Mafia, also known as La Ime, which is Spanish for the M, is a Mexican-American criminal organization operating within the United States. Despite its name, the Mexican Mafia was not founded in Mexico. It is entirely a U.S. prison-based criminal organization. Law enforcement authorities consider it to be the most deadly and influential gang within the California prison system, so much so that the U.S. government regards the Mexican Mafia as one of the most powerful, dangerous, and feared criminal organizations worldwide, even comparing its level of danger and influence to that of major Mexican drug cartels. According to government officials, the Mexican Mafia currently has approximately 500 official members, along with thousands of hitmen and associates behind bars. Additionally, they are believed to have more than 50,000 foot soldiers who engage in illegal activities on the streets, aspiring to become full-fledged members. The Mexican Mafia has established significant influence over various Hispanic street gangs in Southern California, including notorious groups like MS-13 and the 18th Street Gang, which are under their control. But where did it all begin? In 1957, the Mexican Mafia was established by 13 Hispanic gang members from various Los Angeles neighborhoods who were incarcerated at the Dual Vocational Institution, which is now a state prison in Tracy, California. Their primary motive for forming the gang was to protect Hispanic inmates from other rival prison gangs. One of the founding members, Luis Huero Buff Flores, belonged to the Barrio Hawaiian Gardens gang in Hawaiian Gardens, California. During the 1950s and 60s, gang warfare between Hispanic neighborhoods was prevalent. However, Flores managed to unite enemies and set aside their rivalries upon entering the prison system, which was considered an improbable achievement. This requirement for unity has persisted to this day. At the time of its formation, the Mexican Mafia faced well-established Hispanic street gangs such as White Fence, The Avenues, Clanton 14, San Fer, Barrio Nuevo Estrada, and the oldest among them, Primera Flats, which had been operating for over a decade as independent entities. Initially, Luis Flores recruited violent members to build a highly feared organization that could control the illegal activities within Dual Prison. According to LAIM member Ramon Mundo Mendoza, their initial goal was to terrorize the prison system and enjoy certain privileges while serving their sentences. The name Mexican Mafia was initially chosen to resemble the structure of the American Mafia, but it was later modified to avoid confusion with it. Additionally, the use of the Black Hand symbol was a reference to the Black Hand, a notorious criminal organization from the early 20th century. According to the FBI, the Mexican Mafia has arranged contract killings through the Aryan Brotherhood, a white prison gang. Both the Mexican Mafia and the Aryan Brotherhood are enemies of the Norteños and African-American gangs like the Black Guerrilla family and DC Blacks. It is worth noting that despite homosexuals being barred from joining La Ime, they are significantly involved in homosexual prostitution within the prison system. Furthermore, the Avenues gang in the Highland Park area of Los Angeles has been responsible for many street-level homicides carried out on orders from the Mexican Mafia. The Mexican Mafia is engaged in a wide range of criminal activities both inside and outside the prison system, with its primary source of income being drug distribution and extortion from drug distributors outside the prison as well as within the prison system. An example of the Mexican Mafia's influence and power over the Serenos was demonstrated in 1992 when a prominent leader, Joe Pegleg Morgan, ordered an end to drive-by shootings and violence, leading to a significant reduction in such incidents in East Los Angeles. In the 1950s, 2 Mexican Mafia associates shot and killed a grocer during a robbery and later stabbed a sheriff's deputy during their trial. The first murder of a prison guard by La Ime occurred in 1958 at San Quentin State Prison. Throughout the years, they have been involved in multiple murders, both inside and outside prison, often using violent methods to maintain control and dominance. And recently, in 2023, a joint LAPD and FBI investigation led to the arrest of 12 Mexican Mafia members and the seizure of significant amounts of drugs and firearms. The Black Guerrilla family, BGF for short, is an African-American prison and street gang involved in various criminal activities, which may include drug trafficking, extortion, and violent crimes. It was founded by George Jackson in San Quentin State Prison during the Black Power movement. It identifies as an African-American Marxist-Leninist revolutionary organization aiming to promote Black power, dignity in prison, and the overthrow of the U.S. government. The group's economic and ideological ideological goals, known as Jamanomics, are outlined in their Black Book. Although historically politically oriented, the BGF has shifted toward primarily engaging in criminal activities with rival gangs. The BGF has been involved in notable crimes, including the attempted murder of former BGF lawyer Faye Stender in 1979 and the murder of Black Panther Party leader Huey P. Newton in 1989. Tensions between Newton and some BGF members had been long-standing. During the 2015 Baltimore unrest, the BGF, along with the Bloods and Crips, was initially accused of targeting police officers. However, later, leaders of the Bloods and Crips denied the allegations and called for peaceful protests. In some instances, rival gang members worked together to protect Black-owned businesses, Black children, and reporters, redirecting rioters away from those targets. One would assume that protective custody units within prisons would provide a haven from the violence and hostility associated with these gangs. However, even in these supposedly safer quarters, the grip of fear and misconduct persists as some members manage to infiltrate protective custody, ensuring their influence spreads far and wide. To point out details, some federal prisons, including San Quentin State Prison, Lucasville Prison in Ohio, and USP Marion in Illinois, have experienced incidents involving prison gangs. For instance, San Quentin State Prison saw the first murder of a prison guard by the Mexican Mafia in 1958. In April 1993, a violent riot erupted at the Lucasville Prison in Ohio. The riot involved members of the Aryan Brotherhood, the Black Muslims, and other gangs incarcerated in the Southern Ohio Correctional Facility. During the riot, several officers were taken hostage, 9 inmates were killed, and tragically, an officer also lost their life. And in 1983, the United States prison Marion faced a brutal attack by the Aryan Brotherhood, resulting in the deaths of 2 correctional officers. Unlucky prisoners. In alternate cases, and in the harsh environment of prisons, some inmates are not fortunate enough to find protective custody, secure a transfer, or even seek protection from these prison gang members, leaving them vulnerable to potential danger from other inmates. One notable example is Money Sign Suede, a rapper who tragically met a violent end despite his lawyer's claims of past attacks. Incidents like this highlight the challenges faced by certain inmates in ensuring their safety behind bars. Prior to his death, Money Sign Suede had been serving a 32-month sentence for gun charges in Riverside County, as stated by his attorney. The rapper, whose real name is Jamie Brugada Valdez, was reported missing after a head count the night before at approximately 9:55 p.m. Later, he was found in another area of the prison and CPR was attempted, but he remained unresponsive and was pronounced dead at 10:20 p.m. Following his death, the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation imposed restrictions on prisoner movement in the facility. The Monterey County District Attorney's Office is currently conducting an investigation into the circumstances surrounding the rapper's death, while the Monterey County coroner is working to determine the cause of death. According to the rapper's attorney, Nicholas Rosenberg, he was informed that his client had been stabbed in the neck while in the shower. A fellow inmate, who preferred to remain anonymous, mentioned that the rapper had been housed with the general population prisoners, which was unusual for a rapper. Typically, rappers are placed in the sensitive needs yard, designated for prisoners with specific safety concerns or public profiles. However, it is unclear if Money Sign Suede's career had reached a level that warranted such protection. Likewise, Colin Hatch's case illustrates a comparable situation. On Friday, January 26, 1994, Hatch was sentenced to prison for the murder of 7-year-old Sean Williams in Finchley, located in North London. During his sentencing at the Old Bailey, the judge declared, "In my assessment, you must never be reintegrated into society if there remains even the slightest potential for you to engage in criminal behavior again." The jury, consisting of 6 men and 6 women, dismissed Hatch's admission of guilt to a lesser charge of manslaughter, as well as his defense claiming that an uncontrollable compulsion drove him to attack Sean. The prosecution contended that Hatch had premeditated the murder of Sean following a sexual assault. Tragically, in February 2011, Hatch met his demise at the hands of fellow inmate Damian Fowkes while incarcerated at HMP Franklin. Fowkes also made an attempt on the life of child murderer Ian Huntley. Similarly, John Johan, an American Catholic priest, gained notoriety as a serial child rapist who served in various parishes within the Archdiocese of Boston and Massachusetts. Despite undergoing treatment for pedophilia, he was repeatedly reassigned to positions involving contact with children. Geoghan's case became emblematic of the widespread child sexual abuse scandal that deeply impacted the Archdiocese during the 1990s and 2000s. The fallout from this scandal led to the resignation of Boston's Archbishop Cardinal Bernard Francis Law on December 13. Ultimately, Geoghan was found guilty of sexual abuse and defrocked, and in 2002, he was sentenced to 9 to 10 years in Sousa Baranowski Correctional Center, a high-security prison. Tragically, on August 23, 2003, while under protective custody at the same maximum security Sousa Baranowski Correctional Center in Lancaster, Chauvin was violently killed in his cell. Inmate Joseph Druce, serving a life sentence for another murder, strangled and stomped Chauvin to death. Druce had meticulously planned the attack for over a month, viewing Chauvin as a prize. This incident raised concerns about the judgment of prison officials who had placed these two individuals in the same protective custody unit, despite warnings from another inmate about Druce's intentions. Druce was subsequently found guilty of first-degree murder by a Worcester jury on January 25, 2006, rejecting his insanity defense. He was sentenced once again to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Videos emerged on YouTube in June 2007, displaying several correctional officers attempting to open Chauvin's cell door, which Druce had barricaded while carrying out the assault. The videos also captured the efforts of emergency personnel to resuscitate Chauvin. The release of these videos raised questions about how they became public, given that they were recorded by the prison's surveillance systems. Chauvin was laid to rest at Holyhood Cemetery in Brookline, Massachusetts on August 28, 2003. Saving the best for last, we turn our attention to Jesse Michael Anderson, a convicted murderer hailing from the United States. The intriguing and unfortunate twist in his story occurred within the walls of the Columbia Correctional Institution in 1994, where his fate was intertwined with the notorious serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer. In the morning hours of November 28, 1994, an ordinary day took an ominous turn as Dahmer, accompanied by fellow inmates Jesse Anderson and Christopher Scarver, left his cell for assigned work duties. This trio found themselves alone and unsupervised in the confines of the prison gym showers for a span of around 20 minutes. The subsequent events would forever alter their destinies. At approximately 8:10 a.m., a chilling discovery shattered the routine of the prison. Dahmer was found on the bathroom floor of the gym, a victim of a brutal assault. His head and face bore the gruesome marks of a 20-inch metal bar wielded with deadly force by his fellow inmate, Christopher Scarver. The ferocity of the attack was evident, as Dahmer's head had been repeatedly slammed against the unforgiving prison walls during the assault. Despite being rushed to a nearby medical facility, Dahmer's life slipped away, leaving a trail of intrigue and questions. Jesse Anderson, too, had fallen prey to the same instrument of violence. His injuries were grave, and despite the best efforts of medical intervention, he succumbed to his wounds 2 days later. Christopher Scarver, a convicted murderer serving a life sentence for a crime committed in 1990, emerged as the perpetrator of this shocking act. Scarver revealed to authorities that he initiated the attacks with the metal bar, seizing the opportunity when Dahmer was engaged in cleaning a staff locker room. Anderson faced a similar fate while engaged in his own cleaning duties in an inmate locker room. What is perhaps even more disturbing is Scarver's assertion that Dahmer did not offer any resistance or cries for help as the assault unfolded. In a perplexing twist, Scarver later claimed that divine intervention played a role in his actions, asserting that he was following a divine directive. Scarver's alleged message from a higher power dictated the fates of both Dahmer and Anderson. Scarver, believed to be struggling with schizophrenia, admitted to not premeditating these brutal assaults, though he later disclosed to investigators that he had previously concealed the 20-inch iron bar used in the attacks within his clothing shortly before committing the heinous acts. It is essential to note that attacks on prison guards are relatively uncommon due to the clear understanding that they need to be kept safe from the general inmate population, especially in state prisons. Prison guards often have strict protocols and protections in place to minimize the risk of harm while performing their duties. However, for some inmates, the lack of protective measures or transfers can leave them exposed to potential threats from other inmates who may target them for various reasons, such as rivalries, disputes, or involvement in illicit activities within the prison. The case of these inmates, ex-prison guards, and other listed similar incidents serve as a clear point of the challenges in maintaining safety within the prison system and the need for continuous efforts to ensure the well-being and protection of all inmates, especially those deemed to be at risk. Well, all interesting videos must come to an end, but there's more where that came from.